Now on Bravo, extortion, decapitation, beatings and other horrors. Hey, welcome to New Zealand. It's world's deadliest gangs.
Tonight on the world's deadliest gangs, we take a trip to a calmer, more tranquil place. A country of warm and friendly people, a nation that thrives on discipline. The country is New Zealand, surely the world's safest place.
In tonight's show, the gang who record their acts of terror on camera. Gang warfare, Mongrel Mob versus Black Power. But first, the mob in action. New Zealand is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Rolling hills, snow-capped mountains, spectacular coastline, and sheep. New Zealand is notorious for its gang violence. It has a higher percentage of gang members than any other country in the world.
There's more gang members than there are policemen.
Police say they are close to losing control of the gang problem in New Zealand.
The gang violence is spilling over onto the streets.
Tension in the city was so volatile they were safer in the cells.
Handguns or cut-down weapons, throwing Molotov cocktails.
The most notorious gang of them all is the Mongrel Mob.
They're hard, evil people.
You're a person stomped to death. Absolutely horrific.
They gang raped his wife in front of him.
We're just too crazy and we've got evil minds.
Maori-based gangs started to emerge in the Hawkesbury area.
Back in the early 70s, a magistrate of the court lined a few of them up who were facing misdemeanours and told them that they were nothing but a bunch of mongrels.
The name stuck and the Mongrel Mob was born.
I was at a rock concert in 1971 and it was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase Mongrel Mob. It's one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen.
A fledgling group of mobsters turned on the crowd and violence erupted.
Man, I didn't know where these guys had come from. They were bottling people in the face and, I mean, just it was awful, you know. I mean, people were running to get away from it.
Over the years, the gang grew, based around the large Maori families.
Was brought up with Mongrel Mob, family were Mongrel Mob, extended family were Mongrel Mob.
You're now down 3, sometimes 4 generations of people who are deeply immersed in the Mongrel Mob.
The mob's reputation grew as a lawless gang that wanted to be hated.
We're gonna go and get money somewhere else. The way we their best, and that's crime. Simple as that. Give it or we take it.
They don't really respect authority, even within themselves. They're like anarchists.
The Mongrel Mob exists outside society. It's all about fear, it's all about fighting, it's about rape.
To increase the fear factor, they took the traditional Maori tattoo one stage further.
There's not many people looking around looking like me. But I did it because I love the mob.
But I often think, you know, what's going to happen when these guys are grandfathers and they go to their granddaughter's christening in church and he's got "fuck the world" tattooed on his neck.
Although predominantly a Maori gang, anyone is able to join, as long as they can prove their allegiance to the mob. To join the gang, you must first become a prospect and gain the trust of senior members.
The kids don't have any choice. They will do the time. They'll go to jail if they're instructed to do so by the senior members of the gang.
I mean, you probably get 100 stories on young prospectors that had given to the gang and said, oh, fuck, couldn't handle it. In fact, they just bashed us.
Several people walking around who have done life jail sentences for murders they didn't commit simply because they wanted to be in the gang.
If you're willing to do 10 or 11 years for a gang patch, there's very little that the police can do.
And once you become a full member, only then can you wear the notorious Mongrel Mob patch.
It becomes a passion. for what he's wearing and what he believes in. You got to have that patch on your back. Yeah, got to have that patch.
Once in the gang, they expect total devotion.
The drug dealer who had ripped the Mongrel Mob off was made to pay by the mob, and the police, they couldn't figure out who had actually done the killing, so they arrested all 18 Mongrel Mob members that had been there. No matter how much they leaned on them, they couldn't find anyone to sort of admit to it. 18 members go to prison rather than inform on one member. It shows some solidarity.
Once you get in it, there's no getting out.
The mob is everything. The individual doesn't count.
Put them in the gang context. Fired up with a little bit of alcohol and they're capable of anything.
When you're in a gang situation, nobody can say stop.
This has led to some horrific crimes being committed. One of the worst was a 9-hour rape at Ambury Park.
It was a Mongrel Mob convention. A woman got gang raped there and treated shockingly.
They violated her with bottles, urinated on her, pulled petrol over and so on.
The gang had taken photographs of their terrifying crime, but left the camera at the scene, and this was used to convict 8 mob members of gang rape. But incredibly, members of the mob seemed unrepentant at their fellow mobsters' actions.
She didn't get brought on the park, she walked onto the park. And if that's the case, well, I think she deserved whatever she got for being on there.
Despite being hated and despised by the New Zealand public, the mob go from strength to strength.
It's a very vicious lifestyle, and I don't see it coming to an end here. I just see it growing.
The country's not big enough to be messing with the mob. We're just too big and too crazy, and we've got evil minds.
Still to come, gang warfare. Meet the Mongrel Mob's arch rivals. Gang style, facial tattoos and the mob's famous patch. But first, on the street. Porirua is unique in New Zealand as a town dominated by a single gang, the Mongrel Mob. Unhindered by competition from other gangs, it boasts the largest and most organised chapter in the country.
There'd be hundreds, literally hundreds. They've all got friends, they've all got families.
The Porirua mob is based around the Moki family. Their uncles, cousins, brothers are all in the mob. We went in search of the Porirua Mongrel Mob.
Take the camera somewhere else, mate.
Yo.
This fucker's still me. Tell your mate to fuck off.
Oh, shut up. They don't like you guys, do they?
Detective Sergeant Bruce Jenkins and Mike Goose Craig work for the crime control unit of Porirua Police.
They'll do anything so far as crime's concerned, especially if it's to make $1, from misdemeanours, serious violence, aggravated robberies, using firearms and other weapons, homicides, intimidation.
Them and their associates would make up a high proportion of offenders in the community.
And they led us on our search for the Mongrel Mob. First, they took us to the notorious gang pad, where the mob normally congregate.
This is their gang pad in here. You can't see a lot of it at the moment because of the fence that they've put up, obviously to block the view. Surveillance camera. There was a homicide at this pad. One of their members had his throat cut by one of their associates.
With no sign of movement, Mike tries to grab their attention and gets a prominent mob reply.
It wouldn't be uncommon for a prospect or an associate to go up there and have 4 or 5 members, half a dozen members, hitting them with baseball bats and kicking the living daylights out of them.
And soon we come across some prospects in the street.
It's not uncommon for them to run up some quite serious bills known as tick with the gang for drugs and alcohol, and then being forced to going out and committing crimes in order to get the money to pay that back.
But now the closest we're getting to the Mongrel Mob is one of their mascots.
We've known of several incidents where they've stolen dogs and then tried to extort the owners to buy them back.
Bruce knows the girlfriend of a mob member in this street. He goes to see if he can persuade her to talk to us. It's too dangerous for her to be seen talking, so she agrees to join us at the police station. Unfortunately, one of the mob members has warned her off, and she isn't willing to talk.
I finished, I don't want to talk. Yeah. It's a shame, because I don't know what to say.
Undeterred, Bruce decides to go straight to the top and visits the president's house.
This is his house up here, straight ahead. Sometimes he's approachable, sometimes he's not. No, he's not home.
Yeah. Just when we think we're out of luck, Goose passes a familiar face.
It's young Moki, isn't it?
Yeah.
The young guy is the son of the president of the mob, and he's a prospect for the gang.
Hey, do you want to talk to these guys?
Although he's willing to talk, once again it's not safe for him to be seen with us. So he joins us down at the police station, where he told us about the Porirua Mongrel Mob.
It's one of the main gangs in New Zealand, Porirua, and it's got a bad history. My dad was one of the first ones to join. It's the staunchest mob around, and it's also one of the biggest. Sooner or later, one of the old fellas will just ask you if you want to prospect. You have to listen to what the president's got to say. You know, he'll tell you to round up a few boys, round up a few cars in it. There's always 30 of us when we go out and do big hits.
And Mini Rapu tells us how he became a prospect for the gang. We wanted to get closer to the action, so we joined up with John from the Uniform Division. It's Porirua police policy to stop any car with a suspected Mongrel Mob member or associate on board.
John saw something? Andre, you don't want to be filmed, Andre? Why not? From personal experience, they've got previous forms for burglary, assaults, aggravated assaults, and just basically disorder and drinking offences.
Oh, shut up.
Every time we stop a car, it's just an intelligence gathering. It just builds up a big dossier of the gang. Basically one way of keeping on top of who's around, just who's associating who, you know, other Mongrel Mob members from other chapters.
It's such a regular occurrence for the mob being stopped that they have drawn up their own procedures. And before long, we come across another mobster.
Are you part of the Mokies? Yeah. Yeah? What are you, a nephew to...
Son of Sid.
Oh, Sid. Is this your car? Is it in your name? Good man.
Just got it.
Have you? Yeah. The guy we just stopped was... I've stopped him because I think he's a member of the family that's involved in the Mongrel Mob. He's related to the Moki boy that you interviewed earlier today. Yeah, if something happens later on, when we get the registration of the car, sometime we can link it back to him and all his family that have been driving it.
The mob are so committed here that one member has legally changed his name to Mr. L. Mongrel Mob Porirua. Although we'd met various members of the ruling mob family, we still hadn't encountered some of the senior members. But then, just as we were going to call it a day, John spotted an old friend.
He's a senior member of the Mongrel Mob. He's what we call Sergeant at Arms, who control a lot of the gang members and things like that. He's got a quite long record, and it's probably going back to aggravated robberies, rape, firearms and things like that.
So we encountered one of the senior members, and he gave us a traditional Mongrel Mob farewell.
Join us after the break for the world's deadliest gangs. Welcome back to the world's deadliest gangs. Tonight, we're in the hands of the New Zealand-based Mongrel Mob. The Mongrel Mob have taken their roots from Maori culture, but they have adapted these traditions of love and peace and turn them into symbols of hate and terror.
The Mongrel Mob are New Zealand's most feared gang. With their black leathers and full facial tattoos, they make themselves look menacing and very distinctive from other members of their community.
Their intention is clear. It's stated all over them, with the tattoos, with the way they look, with their attitude.
Maori is a culture where facial tattooing is an ancient art form. At least traditionally, were not actually done by tattooing with a needle. They were done by cutting away bits of flesh, so that the traditional Maori facial tattoo is actually like chiseled into the face.
Facial tattoos are just one of the Mongrel Mob's signifiers. They also give special significance to certain numbers.
Align themselves to the number 13 because M for Mongrel Mob is the 13th letter in the alphabet. They have their meetings on the 13th of every month, show how passionate they are about that number.
The Mongrel Mob also have a very distinctive patch on their jackets, but that patch must be earned. Once they have their patch, it stays with them for life.
You'll notice on their patches that they've got the British Bulldog as their emblem, in the colour red because it's the blood dripping out the Bulldog.
They will win their patch. They get to wear the patch on their back and become a patch member when they do something of sufficient sort of danger to impress the gang.
The Mongrel Mob, the biggest gang in New Zealand.
New Zealand ain't big enough for no that's gonna with us.
They're notorious for their terrifying outbursts of violence and brutality. To a true mobster, everyone is your enemy.
There's been a lot of murders, a lot of stabbings, a lot of shootings.
Garage proprietor in Taumaranui was brutally murdered.
The traditional rivals of the Mongrel Mob are Black Power.
And when mob members meet up with Black Powers in there, it's just instant fight.
They can't even walk past each other in the street.
That saw the emergency 111 line run hot in Napier this morning.
This confrontation occurred on the streets of Napier, right in front of a local TV crew. Two Black Power members set upon mobsters Dale Kiley and Suvet Soa. Kiley attacks the Black Power member with a hammer, but gets an iron bar full in the face. And although injured, the mobster didn't back down. Rule number 1, if you're a mobster, never run away from a fight, as young mobster Mini Rapu knows to his cost.
Yeah, we ended up beating up a few Black Power members.
But young mob prospect Mini Rapu didn't stand his ground and left with the fight in full swing.
Yeah, they all came looking for me because I ran.
But it wasn't Black Power looking for him. It was his own gang, and he was going to face the brutal consequences of running away from a fight.
I've got a few cracked ribs and a few dents and dislocated shoulders and big bruises. I couldn't do nothing again because half of them were my family. I deserved it. Never did it again.
New Zealanders know never to get on the wrong side of the mob. John Lawton did, and had to pay the price.
They just kept going at us and going at us all the bloody time. They wouldn't leave us alone, so we just had to stand up to them.
In 1998, the Invercargill Mongrel Mob moved next door to John Lawton. After Lawton complained about their all-night parties, his house was firebombed by mob leader Charles Tikanahu. Lawton gave evidence against Tikanahu in court, who was sentenced to 6 years in jail for arson. Lawton thought this might be the end of it, but he didn't take account of Tikanahu's brother and fellow mobster Sean. Sean continued to terrorise Lawton and amazingly appeared on New Zealand television to talk about the feud.
I hope they are scared, because New Zealand ain't big enough for no that's gonna with us. Mongrel Mob are in every town in this country. Now, what town are they gonna move to?
John Lawton accused the mob of attacking his daughter and threatening to rape his wife.
I ain't really care about her little kid. Deep down within my heart, I really wish that brother had gone in there and raped her.
And Sean isn't scared of the police.
They even got a force. Yeah, no one in this country's got a force big enough to take us on.
The mob's bulldog also attacked Lawton's daughter, and it was ordered to be put down. For the mob, this was like losing a brother.
I can say everyone that was involved in this trial will be sleeping with one eye open. No one executes a Mongrel Mob member and gets away with it. No one f***s with us on our own back's doorstep.
After his appearance on TV, Sean Tekanu was arrested and charged with threatening grievous bodily harm. In the meantime, the Lawtons have left their home and gone into hiding.
The only glory is get your name in the paper, do a bit of porridge, and get out and you're a big he-man.
I was in prison with a guy who was a Mongrel Mob prospect. He was standing in front of a mirror, sort of combing, flicking his hair, and his job was as a waiter for the guards. So I made a comment about, what was he sort of putting himself up for the guards for, sort of just something harmless like that. Well, before I could even react, he spun and grabbed the big carving knife, had me up against the dishwashing machine with the knife at my throat. He wanted to kill me, I saw Mongrel Mob in the eyes.
Greg Newbold also knows what happens when you cross the mob. His neighbour and friend had a run-in with them during a rugby league match. A mobster had stolen his wife's purse, and his friend fought to get it back.
2 weeks later, when he was asleep in bed with his wife, the windows were smashed in. His dog didn't utter a sound because it had had its head cut off. The Mongrel Mob came pouring into the house. They tied him up. They gang raped his wife in front of him. And then they were about to cut his head off when one of them said, "No, don't do it." But he truly thought that his days were ended. But that's the kind of retaliation you can get if you fall on the wrong side of the mob.
The Mongrel Mob are a gang not to be messed with. Their random violence and terror inflicted on innocent people make them one of the world's deadliest gangs.
Well, that's all we've got time for on the world's deadliest gangs. If you're worried about organised crime and gang violence, remember, I can't help you. Bank robbery, money, and the most feared of all. Or Gangchester. Lucky, come on in, eh? Kidnapping, power, firm, the yardies. If you have any trouble with organised crime, call 1-800 Big Tony. Very naughty. The world's most dangerous cities. The Hell's Angels. The drugs cartel. The Bloods, the Crips, hijacking and murder. The world's deadliest gangs.